I want it stated for the record that I absolutely hate maps. Or at least I hate maps that I can't control on the fly. Or at least I hate maps that are like map-like, or that kind of lock you down. It's like, oh, this is over here and this is over there, and that's where they are. I mean, I feel that maps they're too restrictive, and that they should be made up as we go along, if you even need them. I hate maps. Yeah, hate maps. So if we're done, I'm going to leave, but I'm just not sure how to leave the building. So if you could just give me directions, that'd be great. Hello and welcome to this week's Campaign Creator series. My name is Guy and today's video is sponsored by Dungeon Fog, that map maker of choice for this particular channel. Anyway, we love the Dungeon Fog maps that you can make. So why did I start the video by saying that I hate maps? Well, it's all about choosing the right kind of map for your game. And there are a lot of things that we need to think about when thinking about what sort of maps we need to incorporate, and ultimately what sort of maps do you need to make as the creator of the campaign. And there's some very big ramifications of those different choices as well. So let's just jump straight into it. Now, the style choice. Now, this is important. What style of map are you going to go for? And we're going to look at it from three different things: the use, the value, and the tone. So from a user perspective, a map is incredibly useful in terms of telling you where to go, point A to point B. Player characters who have a map can try and start strategizing where to go. They can start looking at future adventures and things that could come out of it. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the virtues of maps. There's whole videos that we've done that on before. But if maps are not going to be particularly useful in your game, or if you're not going to use maps at all, bear in mind that you are going to lose the ability for the players to be able to really project a future in terms of travel. So if you don't want your player characters to be moving around a lot, by removing maps, it kind of takes away the player's choice. By adding in maps, however, suddenly they can see where they can go in a lot more tangible way, quite literally, than if you don't give them the maps. So it's a controlling point. Now, also the value. If you have players who value beautiful maps, who value your time and who recognize that you're going to be putting in a lot of effort to making these maps, then maybe it's of benefit. But if your players are simply going, oh, we're using this as a tactical thing and we expect you to have 20 or 30 maps for a single session and we don't really care what they look like, there's no commentary, oh, that's a pretty map, or I appreciate the time you took to make that map. If they're just going, yeah, okay, we're going there, and there, well then maybe there's not so much value. So maybe the type of map that you choose should be slightly different. And then the tone. Maps are very evocative of tone. If you have an old parchment with a hand-drawn map upon it, it really makes the players feel as if they are seeing what their characters are seeing. Literally, it's in their hands. So the tone can be hugely influenced by that map. Except that that map has taken you a long time to produce. Not only have you had to have drawn and designed the map with hopefully all of the bits and pieces that we've been speaking about on this channel included, but you then also have to put it on paper, which you've soaked in water and tea and coffee to get it nicely stained. And so there's a huge amount of effort that you've put into that to create that tone of an ancient map. Alternatively, if you've used something like Dungeon Fog to create your maps, where you've set lighting, you've set tone, you've set mood, and all those kinds of things, that's something that you want to convey to your players. It gives them a sense, a shorthand, if you like, for your descriptors. If you don't use maps whatsoever, the players are relying specifically on your verbal clues as to what the environment is. So maps can give you quite a nice sense of tone as well, just in the way that you present them. So again, it's about looking at these three different things and saying they don't really have a huge amount of use. The players don't really care, or they usually are off script, in which case the maps that I produce are never used because they're never anywhere where I expect them to be. So maybe then hand-drawn is the best choice for you, something that you can make up on the fly, and I've done videos on how to make maps on the fly. On the other hand, if the players really respond to them and they have great value in them, then you can invest and spend more time. What we then need to look at is executions. That's what I've been talking about. Hand-drawn, mouse created, clicking on Dungeon Fog, for example, or whatever your map making software is of choice, or actually building models. Now, this is a big space that one can unpack very, 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 very thoroughly, and to look at things. Hand-drawn maps where you're just drawing it on the good old Chessex board, the map board that they had, which was dry erased. I loved mine that I used to have. I certainly used to make use of it a lot. What's nice about those kind of non-permanent things is you can erase them and add damage and all that kind of thing. If you're drawing them by hand on graph paper, there's a certain wonderful intimacy that you get with paper and pen. I still remember the smell of the particular graph paper I used to use back in high school, and drawing out with these horrid cheap ballpoint pens which I'd suck on the back of and get a mouthful of ink. It was absolutely horrid, but I remember those experiences very, very well. They bring back fond memories of creating maps. Do you use online software? Do you use software to create your maps? What, again, are we talking about in terms of use, value, and tone? Those are things that need to align. The mouse model, where we're building things virtually online, we're getting to the point now where we're creating 3D environments for virtual characters and virtual interfaces. That's exciting space. We've got things like Dungeon Fog. We've got things like Photoshop if you want to go and do it manually and those kinds of things. So there is that definite benefit. And of course, when you are working digitally, you can add in things. You can add in visual effects. You could add in snow falling or rain falling on some of the more advanced pieces of technology out there if you're going to be using that kind of thing. And then of course building an actual model, physically building the structure using whatever 3D printed or bought or paper, cardboard cutouted, whatever, using all of that creates a very different experience. And you're going to have to manage those experiences. So the hand-drawn stuff is a handout, or you are drawing it as the characters are advancing. This might sound ideal. The characters don't know what's in the next room until they walk into the next room. It solves the problem of fog of war very, very easily. The challenge, of course, is that as you're drawing the room, you're losing the players. It takes you a few seconds to draw a square for sure, but if it's a circular room, how accurately are you going to draw that circular room? If there's objects in it that you want to place into it, again, how long is it going to take you to do that? And whilst you're doing that, what are the players doing? Probably looking at their phones or waiting for you to finish drawing it. So that's the negative. The benefit, of course, is that you can decide that the session's been going on for too long. You want it to get to a good conclusion point, so you can just cut out what you had planned in your head or what you'd drawn on paper earlier. If you're drawing it for the players, instead of having now 10 more rooms that they have to explore through to, you simply draw a corridor to the final conclusion. So they're very malleable, they're very, very effective in terms of controlling your time, but there is that problem of what to do whilst you are actually drawing those maps. There's not very much that you can do, as a matter of fact. With the computer model stuff, obviously you've either printed it out or you're playing on one of those nice screens. Somehow you are translating from digital into real world for the players to interact with. Your fog of war now becomes dependent on what kind of display you're using. If you're just presenting the map, there is no fog of war. It is what it is, and the players can see everything, and you rely on them to not metagame. Alternatively, if you're using a virtual tabletop, suddenly you've got all these wonderful options where the token highlights what can be seen and what can't be seen. And we're seeing that on the rise, which really then creates a lot more of a visceral experience. At the same time, however, suddenly the players are no longer in that space, they're no longer wandering those corridors themselves, they're now moving a token. So there's a certain distancing that's going to happen as a result of that. We need to be aware of these things. These mouse models are static. Once you've created the map, you've created it, and you can't really change it on the fly. Not easily, anyway. A lot of them allow you to make changes, but they're not just erase and move on, which is what the hand version definitely allows you to do. The 3D model version, of course, is the most spectacular. When you sit down and there's a giant structure in front of you and it's a complete to-scale replication of Hogwarts, and the characters can literally move walls away to see inside little rooms filled with beds and tables and chairs and all that kind of wonderful stuff, it definitely transports the player into that space. It's also taken you months and months and months and months to generate all of that material, and once you've generated cave number 5, how many more cave pieces do you need to store in a plastic box in your gigantic warehouse before you're going to use those same components again? This is something that I've noticed. People who like to build these things, that is a hobby in itself, and using it within the game is just a bonus. So, and of course, fog of war is a problem because you have to build the structure beforehand, because if you're building it whilst your players are waiting, it's even worse than doing it by hand, because now you're putting all the pieces together. And so each one of these different methods has a benefit and it has a negative. As we move closer towards building virtual buildings that we can manipulate with AR and all that kind of wonderful stuff, these problems don't go away. So again, it's about deciding what is right for you in terms of your style, in terms of your execution, and finally, in terms of your enjoyment. Whatever system you're going to use, whether you're drawing the map by hand, by computer, or you're building this thing, it's going to take you time. Hand-drawn, I think, arguably is the fastest method in which to design a dungeon. We're not talking about random dungeon generators online, of course, but if you're actually designing it by hand is still, I think, the fastest way to do it. It won't look nearly as good as the mouse model, and it certainly won't look as good as a 3D actual built structure. However, it's certainly the fastest. But what makes you happy? You're going to be spending a lot of time on these things, and the players are potentially not going to see them because they go in a different direction, or when they do get there, they die at the first door, or they decide they can't actually progress any further, so they turn around and go away and they don't come back to the structure. So for me, it's about being an actual hobby. And when I sit and I make maps, oftentimes for a game I'll go, oh, I need that map, I need that map. But there are many times as well when I'm stressed or when I just need to get away from it all. I open up a program, in my particular case it's Dungeon Fog, and I just click around and I build a map. I go, oh, let's do that building, or let's try and do that, or let's do this. Something that I've certainly learnt recently is when building circular structures, you get vast amounts of space that you have to fill. So circular dungeons are a lot bigger than the square dungeons, I can tell you that. But I use it as a relaxation tool, and then I just happen to have a store of maps that I can use in my games. So that's how it works for me. How does it work for you, however? Do you find map making relaxing? Do you find it a chore? Do you find it something that you have to do? Do you just not like doing it? Or is it just part of the job of being a great GM and you just get on with it? Let me know in the comments down below. How do you handle maps? Are you a hand drawer? Are you an interface digital user? Or are you a 3D terrain modeler and builder? Let me know in the comments down below. It'd be interesting to see what the majority of us use. I know certainly before the internet, it was all hand drawn for me back in the day. Now, of course, it's all mouse and modeling. I enjoy modeling, but I don't have a warehouse to store all the cool stuff in, and sometimes LED lighting gets a bit tricky. Anyway, that's enough from me on how and what type of map you should possibly be looking at using in your next campaign to help make you a happier game master and to maybe just pander to your character's desires and needs in a little bit of a slightly different way. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the happiest of campaign creation.